need to do is just plug numbers into the equation, and you will find them. So let's go through these numbers. Let me make sure the share it's fine. Yeah. So I guess you can see. Okay, so basically what you really need to do is that, so we have the equation, which is the this is the well, what you really need to do is you find the marginal revenue equal to marginal cost equation, okay, which is here. Marginal cost equal to marginal revenue equation. That's the equation, okay. And then you will know that you will see that P equal to C plus 1 divided by B multiplied by N, right? So you know this expression, but you know how to express P here, P, right? And so you know the number C. C is 5,000, and B is 1 over 30,000, okay? 1 over 30,000. So you can put these two numbers. C is 5,000, B is 1 over 30,000 into this equation. Okay, 5,000 and 1 over 30,000 in here. So what we don't know is N. Okay, so this P is basically here. So the P here, okay, market price P. All right, and we do not know N. We do not know number of firms operating in the market, and we know that once we have the average cost curve, then we can find the intersection. Right, the intersection will give us solution for the N, number of firms operating in the market. So what is the industrial-wide average cost curve? That is here. Okay. So fixed cost over sales plus C. C is 5,000. So we know the sales for each country. We know the fixed cost is same for each country, right? $750 million, and the sales, which is 900,000 for home country and 1.6 million for the foreign country. And now you see that we have AC, that is this, and we have the price, that is this. So we have two equations, right? We have N as the unknown, and then we know if they equal, that means we are at the point E here. So that will give us a solution. Okay. So basically what we do here is very simple. So this is the average cost, and this is the so this equation, I'll show you here. So basically this is P, this is AC, okay? When you equalize them, you will be able to solve for N. When you solve for N, solve equation 1 for N, you got two numbers. One is -6, one is +6. And we know that we cannot have minus, right? Negative number of firms in the market. So we only take the positive number. And that's 6, which is here. 6. Okay. And if we do it for foreign country, so what's the only difference between home country and foreign country? because the production costs are same, so the only difference is the size of the market. So 1.6 million units of sales. So we replace 900,000 to 1.6 million, and then we just simplify the numbers. We have these numbers, and then we solve equation 3 for the value of n. We got 8. You can do it by hand too. Actually, it's quite simple. Just cross out this, and it's very simple. The 5,000 can be crossed out. And anyway, the solution for this equation is 8. We can ignore the -8 because it's not possible. Okay. So for the integrated world market here for C, it's also very straightforward. So you combine the market size for home market and foreign market. So which is this? So you have 900,000 vehicles sold in home market and 1.6 million in the foreign market. You combine them equal to 2.5 million. Okay, so you put 2.5 million here, and then everything else being same, you solve for n. So you have 10 firms operating in the market. Okay, and so once you know n, right? So you can solve for the price. The price is simple. The price is you can just plug in the number here, right? The price is here. So P equal to 5,000 plus 1 over B multiplied by 6. Okay. So you got 5,000 plus 5,000 equal to 10,000, which is here for home. Yeah, so you know what I mean, right? You know my point here, right? So if you know the n, you can solve for the price. You can solve for how much is the price that foreign market and home market charge. And you can also, following the same logic and same way, you can also find how much is the price that the integrated market will the firm be charging to their consumers. All right. Okay, I guess that's the exercise. I think it's quite simple. All right. Any questions before we move on? You can ask questions. All right. Monopolistic competition and trade, product differentiations, and internal economies of scale lead to trade between similar countries with no comparative advantage. Differences between them. You see, so in a previous trade model, right? We have technology differences, we have endowment differences, and those differences will lead to trade, right? Will lead to comparative advantage, and therefore we will trade with each other, and then we have welfare gain. But when we don't really need those, like in this economy of scale model, right? When we're working with the model with economy of scale, we do not need any of this resource advantage or technology advantage. We can still trade and we can still gain from trade through product differentiation and economies of scale. Okay, so we don't really need any of the previous comparative advantage that we learned right in the previous chapters. So this is a very different kind of trade than the one based on comparative advantage, where each country export its comparative advantage good. So let's look at inter-industry trade. So what is inter-industry trade? It's basically firms that they have similar industries and then they still trade to each other, and we still have gain from trade because of that. Yeah, that's very powerful because that shapes the new trade phenomenon, like, or the new form of trade like we have in the past 4 decades. we are basically following this model, right? Specializations and we'll go through one example later. Like we're using North America auto industry as an example to show you why still when country they are making the same thing, why they still trade, and then why they can be benefit from this kind of trade. Okay. Let's go through these definitions first. Inter-industry trade refers to two-way exchanges of similar goods. The two new channels for welfare benefit from trades benefit from greater varieties at a lower price. So we went through our numerical example, right? Home country and foreign country both produce manufacturing uh, of cars, right? Automobiles, and then even they manufacture an automobile and they trade, they can still benefit from each other. You don't have to produce different goods. You produce banana, I produce clothes, and then we trade. We don't need that. Even for a single industry, like same industry, when we trade, we can still be benefit from large varieties and then lower costs. And this is we're gonna go through some definition and some examples to show you exactly what's going on, right? And what's going on in the world. Um, to seal this idea. Okay, a smaller country gain more. They will benefit more from integrated economy. About 25 to 50% of world trade is intra-industry. What it means is that, so we talk about banana trade for clothes, right? Making clothes trade for banana, this kind of things, exchange of different goods. But here, when we look at statistics, actually about 25 to 50% of world trades are same goods, similar goods. Okay, like China buys cell phone from South Korea, Samsung, LG, and also we are making cell phones, right? Huawei, Xiaomi, and South Korean people also buy Xiaomi phones, Huawei phones from China. Okay, this is same as This is same for South Korea and America, right? iPhone selling to South Korea, and Samsung sells to US, even though US has their own phone. So this is kind of you can think of it as intra-industry trade. Most prominent is the trade of manufacturing goods among advanced nations, which accounts for the majority of world trade. For the US, industry that have the most inter-industry trade, such as pharmaceuticals, chemicals, specialized machineries, require relatively large amount of skilled labor, technology, and physical labor. So here is the list. Most of inter-industry trade happens in those areas: metalworking machineries, medical, pharmaceuticals, and equipments, computers, scientific equipments, and less on footwear. They those low skill categories. Furnitures are low. These are percentage. Firm responses to trade. Increased competitions tends to hurt the worst performing firms. Wait a second. Wait a second. Let me make sure everything's working. Okay. Hurt the worst performing firms. And this is our story, right? So I was trying to give you a story. When you have 6 firms in the home country and 8 firms in the foreign country, the total number of firms in the world is 14 before trade, but each of them are operating on their own. But once you have world trade, the total number in the world for the firms are actually lower because some of them are not very efficient. They cannot compete, and then they exit the market. But even though the total number is lower, but then each country will enjoy more variety, right? From home country, they enjoy 6 variety to 10. For foreign country, they enjoy from 8 variety to 10, right? So everyone is happy. So when the better performing firms expand and then the worst performing ones exit, overall the overall industry performance improves. Trade and economics integration improve industry performance as much as the discovery of new, better technology does. Okay. And yeah, here is the example. We use the real story of auto industry between US and Canada. So before 1965, tariff protection, like country like Canada, US, they all protect their own industry, like auto industry. So tariff protections by Canada and US produced a Canadian auto industry that was largely self-sufficient. So most of the Canadian car makers, they make on their own. They produce every single part by themselves. Neither importing nor exporting. So they don't do exporting or importing. And the Canadian auto industry was about 10% of the size of the US and had a labor productivity about 30% lower than that of the US. And how do they show the inefficiency, the low productivity? Here it is. Most Canadian plants produce several different things, requiring the plants to shut down periodically to change over from producing one item to another one, to hold larger inventories and to use less specialized machines. Okay, and something has changed in 1964. The US and Canada agreed to establish a free trade in automobiles. So you know that there's North American Trade Agreement, right? Before the North American Trade Agreement, they moving little by little, they do for automobile in 1964. So one step ahead, which allowed the automakers to recognize their production, to reorganize their production. The overall level of Canadian productions and employment was maintained. So before trade, most people they afraid that the US are more productive. So if Canadian open their border, open their trade, then the Canadian worker may not be able to compete with the US automobiles because they are more productive, they're cheaper, they're more skillful. And this is the worry usually a country would have before they open their border. However, the data, the real data, the actual data shows us this is not true. Canadian parts, they did not lose any employment. Okay. Basically, the production and the employment was maintained, was cheap at a similar level. The Canadian subsidiaries cut many products were made in Canada. Production level for the model produced in Canada rose dramatically, rose more, as those Canadian plants become the only one of the main supplier of that model for the whole entire American market, North American market. So basically what happened is that, so you're producing many models, right? You're producing many models. And once the trade started, and once trade started, so what happened is that Canadian workers, they will find whatever they're good at, right? Maybe they have 10 different models of cars and they have trucks, maybe they have small cars, sedans, and van and different things. And then they find out that they're not good at making vans. They're not good at making trucks. So they find that, oh, you know what, maybe I'm good at making smaller passenger vehicles. So they will focus on the particular model that they're making. And then those models that they concentrate, they don't do many different things. They just focus on one thing, one or two different models. And they find themselves really good at making those specialized models. And then they become very good that they are the only one, they become the only one that supply the whole American market. So they become the only supplier of that model for Canada and the US because, economic scale, right? Their market extended. And then they will be able to buy parts from the American. Since if they start trading, right, they can buy some parts that they find it cheaper, right? Before they have to buy from Canadian supplier, now they can buy from American supplier, and then if it's cheaper, it's better, right? So they can cut down their production costs. And for those models that they are not making anymore, they will import from the US. Okay, so it's not like consumer will lose some choice. They are not like they're gonna lose any varieties because trade allow them to import a different variety from the US. So both export and import increased sharply between these two countries. And by early 1970s, the Canadian industry was comparable to the US industry in terms of productivity. So the Canadian worker become productive as much as the US workers in about roughly 10 years time, right? 1964 and 1970s. In about 10 years time, 1 decade. Later on, this transformation of automobile industry was extended to include Mexico. So North American Trade Agreement. Okay, so both of them they share some duty and then they just trade with each other. Okay, so they find that this is good for all these members. The first decade following NAFTA, trade in cars between US and Mexico more than double in both directions and then double again in ensuing decade, highlighting the increased importance of intra-industry trade. So this is what we will be showing. Some losers will exit loser. Some inefficient manufacturers will be exiting the market because they cannot really compete, even they have higher costs. So A here, we have panel A, panel B. A here is the demand curve for all firms, changes from D to D prime. It's flatter and it has a lower vertical intercept. So B is the cost. So effects of the shift in the demand on the operating profit of firms with different marginal costs C. And firm with marginal costs between the old C and the new C will be staying in the market. One just make more profit, the other one less. But any operation, any business or firms that they are operating beyond the C star, like if the cost is even higher than the C star, will be forced to exit the market. Okay. And some firm with the lowest marginal cost level gain from the integration and their profit will increase. Okay. The concern raised over the few final assembly plants relocating from the US to Mexico rarely mentioned to the large growth of US autos and parts exported to Mexico. Over two-thirds of Mexican automobile imports originated in the US in 2002. So it's not like ending the NAFTA will likely result in any higher car productions in the US. So North American free trade agreement is proven to be it's like allowing trade, removing any trade barrier is proven to be beneficial for all these three countries. Even all of them are making cars, they're manufacturing cars. We observe that all of them are benefiting from free trade, allowing trade between among them. Okay. And now we have demands, marginal costs, marginal revenues, and then this operating profits. So lower marginal costs, you have higher operating profits, and higher marginal costs have lower operating profits. So we have demand and cost curve for firm one and firm two. So we have two firms. One firm has lower marginal cost, the other firm has higher marginal cost. And firm one has a lower marginal cost than firm two. And both firms face the same demand curve. This is the same demand curve they are facing. It's just this is lower marginal cost for firm one. This is marginal cost for firm two. Okay, the shaded area here represent the operating profit for both firms. Okay. Well, marginal cost intersect with marginal revenue. And this is the production. All right, this is production. This is the output of firm one. This is the output for firm two. And operating profit as a function of the firm's marginal cost. So we show it on here. If you have a lower marginal cost, here you have a higher operating profit. So it's same implication, right? You just move the same scenario from firm to here. You have a lower marginal, you have a lower operating profit. So any firm with marginal cost above C star, this is coming from this graph, different representation, will not be able to operate and shut down and close bankrupted. They will not be able to cover their costs. Okay, trade costs and export dimension. Most US firms do not export anything, any activities at all. Sell only to the US customers. About 35% of US manufacturing firms report exports. Even in industry that export much of that of what they produce, such as chemicals, machineries, electronics, and transportation, fewer than 40% of the firm's exports. Okay. A major reason why trade costs reduce trade so much. So trade costs is a very important element that reduces trade. And we are trying to show that here. Combining the cost curve from what we learned just now. So a major reason why trade costs reduce trade so much is that they drastically reduce the number of firms being able to sell to customers overseas. Trade costs add two important predictions to our model of monopolistic conditions and trade. And why only a small number of sets of firms export, why exporters are relatively large and more productive. So we will be trying to show, why firms are typically larger for those ones that they export. So we don't really see smaller firms export. We see only large firms export, and relatively smaller number of them. So this is what we want to show using this theory on the graph to match what we have observed in the real world. Overwhelming empirical support for this prediction that exporting firms are bigger and more productive than firms in the same industry that they do not export. In the US, in a typical manufacturing industry, an exporting firm is on average more than twice as large as a firm that do not export. Differences between exporter and non-exporters are even larger in many European countries. So this is the reported sales of the industries. We see that in US, computer electronics have the most export, I think because US has the highest advantage in computers and electronics manufacturing, right? Yeah, equipment, supplying chemistries, machineries, transportation equipments, those including bus, cars, airplane, Airbus, Boeing, those kind of big items. Computers, think about Microsoft, Microsoft, HP, Dell, Apple. So this is how we show trade costs. You can think about is transportation cost or tariff or trade barrier. Anything that we can see that is extra to the production cost. So when you want to sell goods from China to US, then anything that is additional to how much we pay for the fixed cost and the average cost, right? Fixed cost plus the variable cost, everything that is when the product is out of the doors of the factory, and this is the total cost, right? So anything on top of that is the trade cost, including the cost that is moving the goods to the seaport, and then you have to pay for the clearance at the seaport, and then load it to the ship, the cargo ship, and then you have to pay for the cargo ship to ship from China to US. And once arrived in US, you have to pay for the custom, right? Custom clearance, and then you also have to pay for the logistic in US, transportation in the US, and the sales, additional costs to that. Those are the trade costs, the total trade costs. No matter it's observable or non-observable, but those are the trade costs. And here is what we want to show on the graph by simply all include them in T. Okay, so this is without trade costs. Firm 1 and firm 2. So marginal cost for firm 1, marginal cost for firm 2. All right. Firm 1 and firm 2 operate in domestic market. And only firm 1 choose to export to foreign market, because you see that only firm 1 do, because firm 1, if we are using the economy of scale theory to understand this. So if firm 1 has a lower marginal cost, probably firm 1 is more efficient. They have better technology. They are better, they are bigger, they are larger, or they are so forget about fixed marginal cost. If you are larger, maybe in this idea, right? Think about if you and me are making bread, and if I'm larger, our assumption of same marginal cost do not apply anymore, because marginal cost, what is that? It's the flour, sugar, right? And other stuff. So if I'm much larger, maybe I will be able to get some material at a lower price. You are going to get flour from the supermarket by maybe 10 kilogram a day, but if I'm much larger, I will be buying 1 ton a day, and I will not go to supermarket to buy. I will go directly to the mill, right? Wheat mill or those flour manufacturing wholesaler to buy. So I will be able to get it for a cheaper price. So my marginal cost will be cheaper if I'm large. Try to think about it in this picture, okay? So only firm 1 chooses to export to the foreign market because it will be still profitable, but firm 2 will not be profitable anymore. Think about this. So if both of them have to pay for the trade costs, then trade costs C2, after paying the trade costs, it will put firm 2 beyond C star at a cost that is not able to allow them to run, right? It's not able to allow them to run this business. So they will not be able to serve the foreign market, but firm 1 will be able to serve the foreign market even after they are paying the trade cost here, because it's still below C star. All right, so let's talk about dumping. What is dumping? Dumping is the practice of charging a lower price for exported goods than for the goods sold domestically. So if I want to put it to a real life example, you can think about dumping as if Huawei charge 2,000 yuan in China, but if they charge 1,500 yuan somewhere else, in Japan or in South Korea, so that will be considered dumping because they're selling a price in overseas market that is cheaper than the domestic market. This will not make sense for most of the people there, right? Because you have to pay for the trade costs, right? The same phone selling in China, when they arrive in South Korea, they have to pay for the trade costs. And after considering the trade costs and including every cost that is during the shipping and arriving in also in South Korea, then it has to be higher than the domestic price, right? But if you're charging a lower one, then it will be considered dumping. So dumping is an example of price discrimination because you charge a different price between domestic consumers and foreign consumers. Price discrimination and dumping may happen only if the market is imperfect, firms are able to control the price, and market are segmented so that the goods are not easily bought in one market and resold in another market. So this is also very important. It's like it serves as a widget, stopping the trade between these two places. It's like this. So if you are if you are charging price, like if you're charging 2,000 in China but 1,500 in South Korea for the same phone, if you are doing that, then many consumer from from South Korea, they can easily bring the phones, right, themselves. They don't really need you to sell. They can basically run business by themselves, buying the phones in China and send it to South Korea and sell for the same price, basically, right? And then also if you're doing that, I'm sorry, on the other way. So if you're selling 2,000 in China, and then if you are practicing price discrimination and selling for 1,500 in South Korea, then South Korean people can buy phones in South Korean market and then bring it to China and sell for 1,600, 1,700. That's lower than the domestic price, and eventually the price will be somewhere converged to somewhere in the middle, right? So firms will not be able to practicing price discrimination if markets are freely flow among them. The goods are freely flow among them, so they will not be able to practice price discrimination. And dumping can be a profit maximizing strategy. A firm with larger marginal cost chooses to set a lower markup over the marginal cost. And therefore, an exporting firm will respond to the trade cost by lowering their markup for the export market. So if they're facing trade costs, they will try to make less money, charge a lower markup, so that the price in the foreign market can be sold. And so before we talk about anti-dumping, before we talk about protectionism and dumping, so why dumping? It's not good. Like many countries, they actually, not many countries, all of them basically, they do not like dumping from other countries. So imagine if Chinese firms like say Huawei or Xiaomi practice dumping in South Korea, what happens is that if the cost of a Xiaomi phone is 2,000 yuan, and Xiaomi somehow they want to sell the same Xiaomi phone in South Korea for about 500 yuan, so it's like 1,500 yuan lower than the domestic price. It's like lower below. It's the price that is lower than the cost. And what happens is that because it's so cheap, if nobody is doing anything about it, then nobody will buy Samsung anymore in South Korea. Nobody will buy Samsung phones because the Chinese phones are so cheap, right? And eventually, for a short period of time, maybe Xiaomi will lose money because they're selling below cost. But then, in a short period of time, it will kill Samsung because nobody buys Samsung anymore. Samsung is too expensive. And once Samsung is killed, then there will be no more cell phone, smartphone industry, right? The firm is dead in South Korea. Then the Chinese firm will become monopoly. When it becomes monopoly, no competition, and it becomes so big, Xiaomi becomes so big, then they will be able to charge at a really high price than it otherwise would be when there is competition. Okay, so country they do not like dumping from foreign country. China do not like dumping from South Korea firm the phones, right? You don't want to have a Samsung phone selling for 100 yuan. That will kill the cell phone makers, right, in China. So nobody like that. So they want fair practice. So that's the idea. And why there is anti-dumping measures and protectionism. against any dumping activities. So a U.S. firm may appeal to the Commerce Department, right? Commerce Department to investigate if dumping by foreign firms have injured the U.S. firms, and then if the case is established, if the case is confirmed, so they have to. You cannot say, oh yeah, the price is different. The price in domestic and in foreign market is different. So this firm is practicing dumping. You cannot really claim that. They still have to send out some personnel, some people to investigate the whole thing, whether this is the case or not, whether they are really practicing dumping. If the case is established, what will the Commerce Department do? Is they will put a penalty, like it's a penalty, right? It's a tax or a special tariff on that product to make sure the price once the product arrives in US will be at a fair price. If it's like Samsung, they're selling at a significantly cheaper price in US, then if the US investigators they find out this is true, then they will put a tariff on Samsung phones that will tax it to make it pay at the border, and it's enough to make sure the phone once it's arrived in the consumer market in the States will be at the fair price compared to the US cell phone makers products. That's the idea. Anti-dumping measures are basically trying to bring up the price to the fair level once it's arrived in the foreign market. Okay. And next, the ITC, the International Trade Commission, determines if injury to the US firm has occurred or likely to occur, then they will try to put an anti-dumping duty for this product. Okay. So basically, this is the trend of anti-dumping. Many of these anti-dumping measures or punishments are happening in the advanced nations before 1990s against developing countries. But nowadays, the trend has changed a bit because China start complaining anti-dumping on foreign firms too. So there's a rise, not only China, but India too. So there's a rise in the trend that developing country also raises the issue of anti-dumping against foreign products as well. So the trend has changed in the recent 2 decades. But of course, there's concerns over this practice because if every country, they basically, I will just like put it in a very short words because we only have like 2-3 minutes. We all know WTO, and WTO is the organization that ensure firms, I mean countries, the member countries cannot charge a significant high level of tariff, right? They have rules on how much tariff you can charge on goods, importing goods. They will make sure a fair level of tariff because there are almost 170, close to 180 countries belong to the WTO organization, and then they have to follow the rules. They cannot really charge tariff when they think they need to charge the tariff. They want to when they think they need the tariff to protect their market, but they cannot do it because it's governed by WTO. So they will try another way, which lead them to look at anti-dumping. Anti-dumping is kind of a special tariff on products, right? So countries, if they want to increase protection, but they don't want to touch any tariff, they can use anti-dumping measures. And WTO start worrying the abuse of anti-dumping measures as a protection to their market. So we can talk about this in another occasion, but yeah, that's all for anti-dumping. All right, so we are almost to the end of the class. So if you have any questions, you can ask. Before we end, you can ask me questions. We have about 1 minute left.